Well, guys, I'm not sure if my experiment resulted in a success or not. Honestly, I think I bit off a little bit more than I can chew. Here, I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this is in the competition screen. You can see, of course, there are a lot of PanSa East players who are featuring here in terms of what's going well in the league. But there's a problem, which is that these other players who are doing quite well, including Pundud, are players who we originally signed. So you see that right there. There's PanSa. This is another player from Brunei. And we signed this player, and for whatever reason, probably due to inconsistency, we decided, hey, this person's not good enough. We're going to go ahead and release them on a free. And this person goes over to Pago Youth, who are currently in second place and who we play next, and starts scoring 11 goals and 5 appearances with 1 assist, 2 player of the match, 8.42 rating. Yeah, this was kind of a mistake. This was probably not the best thing in the world to do. And the other crazy thing, of course, is that they would prefer not to play for me because I released them without really giving them much of a chance because of that inconsistency. We can see that with all of these people. So Jonica Collins, who also is with Pago Youth. Oh, this is a different one. Look at this. This is a player who is a native Pago Youth player, which means, of course, that we probably can sign him, and we could. So let's go ahead and do that. We know this one, Afa Leatualevao. He originally was a PanSa player and drove me nuts. Had a pretty poor time of it with Ilau and Tomata there. Didn't have a great season last season. Has been playing much better this season, but he suffers a lot from major inconsistency. We know that already, so we don't need to worry too much about him. There's Omar Aden, who is another player, a goaltender, another player that we picked up. He is from Djibouti. And he's been pretty good with a 7.18 rating in goal, 3 goals conceded in 6 matches. And then there's this one, Taufaga Fatu Taufaga, who is another player that we picked up. This one from Samoa, who wound up with Green Bay and who's been doing pretty well in goal as well. So you can see what the problem is, right? As we go through, we can pick any one of these teams. We can look at the senior squad, and then we look over here at nationality. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players who are from foreign countries. Every single one of those is a player that came in through our team. Every single one of them. This one from South Korea is one who I went and found and decided to just go ahead and bring on and then released him. Looks like he went over to, looks like we did this before actually with Kangwon Chul. He was originally in American Samoa. Okay, and then we released him. He went over to Goyang FC and then wound up with Pago Youth again. But you'll see stuff like that. And because I released him, he doesn't want to play for us, or at least it doesn't say anything about him there. We're not going to get him again because there's the reason why I got rid of him. 32 years old as well. Yeah, that's a little bit ridiculous. But you can see that in any one of these clubs, it doesn't really matter whether they're on top or on the bottom. Everywhere you look, you're going to run into a bunch of foreign players who are players that came in through us, both the good and the bad. So Jonico Pinto is a player that we picked up from Timor-Leste and looked at and said, yeah, maybe not. And he went straight over to Royal Puma. Let's see if we can find any other examples of this. Let's look at the Dafuna Jets, who we lost to last season. That was a famous loss. So when we look at their squad, there we go. We will see again only 1, 2, 3, 4 players who came in to American Samoa through us. For example, Fatua Hakai, who came in from Samoa into American Samoa and then promptly went over to the Dafuna Jets. So, yeah, there's a pattern here that I'm noticing, right? And part of the thing that causes this, now I know that the league rules are accurate because this comes from Dave, the editor. He did his homework. I know that already. I don't even have to ask. Right, but the problem that you can see here is that there are absolutely no rules about foreign players. Now, there's kind of a problem with this in Football Manager, which is that, because we're at the amateur level, really any amateur player in the world can theoretically be convinced to come over and play for our team, even though the chances of somebody going from, from South Korea to American Samoa to play amateur football is non-existent, right? It does mean something, though, for future scouting. So the transfer window is closed right now, and I'm not going to do this, but later on, in theory at least, if we were going to look at, say, Japan, and I have the Japanese teams loaded, if we were going to go here and go to, one of these lower down leagues somewhere, Kanto Soccer League Division 1, something like that, and if we were to sort of hunt around and see if we can figure something out, we might be able to find a league that doesn't have all grayed out players, that has some actual players, so that probably would not be it. But if we looked around a little bit, we could, in theory, find teams that have a bunch of amateur players. Now, it looks like we're going to have mostly some pretty bad luck. So this guy's on an actual part-time contract, Ryo Mikami, so we can't exactly go in and pick him up. But, if we took a little bit of time and if we really, really went deep down and started looking out for different types of players, we could find them. And once we find them, then we could figure out if there's a way to bring them over. Here's one, Yohei Nakamura. So if we really wanted to, we could say, I don't know, take a day in the transfer window and say, okay, this is the day that we concentrate on Japanese players. We could look at Daigo Ichikawa and say, well, he doesn't look like much of anything as a goaltender from what we can see. We could say, well, maybe he's better than the guy that we have, and we could bring him on over and say, okay, let's take a look at him and see if we like him or not. Now, we don't have to sign the player. We could bring him in over on a trial. But in my experience, usually if you try to go after guys with a trial and you're a team like ours, the other team will just refuse to even talk with you, right? There's no reason for them to even entertain possibly the idea of their player having a trial with you. And so the easiest thing that happens is, or the easiest thing to do is you find a bunch of amateur players and you go over and just sign them and have them come on over and see what they can do. One of the things I will do when I look through these is I will sort by the type of contract. So when you look at their national team, say in Japan, they're all going to be full contract because it's mostly a actual like professional country. This is probably not the place that you would normally look for players that are fully amateur. But there are other things you can do and other ways you can probably figure this out. I'm guessing that, see, it doesn't let me do this. I'm guessing that there's probably some way when we're looking into the Japan world that we could figure out which players are actually amateur, which players are professional, which players are semi-professional, and be able to look at that without necessarily having to do a whole bunch of scouting or without having to like run around and do all sorts of crazy stuff, right? And that's really sort of the thing we want to do. There are some countries out there, of course, especially more impoverished countries in which everything is going to be naturally be amateur. And so that's other places you can look at. So if we looked at, say, Madagascar, if I can spell it right, there we go. I don't know this because I haven't taken a look yet, but my guess is, you're going to see some guys who are on month-to-month contracts, and this is what you're looking for, right? These guys who are on month-to-month contracts, in theory, can be brought over to your team, and you can just go ahead and like sign them straight off. And then, if you actually want this player, if you're looking for another midfielder or whatever, you could go for Remy Saindina and then go after every other midfielder you see who is on the national team or who happens to be playing well in the league or something like that. If you were to do something like that for, I don't know, Madagascar or one of these other countries, you could, at least in theory, figure out a way to get the best players you possibly can. And if you're able to do that, it's at least certainly possible that you could pick off the best players in each country that are amateurs and just have them come straight to your team pretty much no matter where you are. You have to be careful and you have to make sure that the rules that you're playing under allow you to do that, right? If you have foreigner restrictions, it's not going to work. But, if you don't have those foreigner restrictions, it's possible that you might be able to make it work. I mean, Jimmy Rocco Tonandrasana, for example, we could look into him, approach to sign. Nope, no interest in talking with us, so, there's no chance for that 19-year-old. But you can look at a whole bunch of others and say, well, maybe there's some other player who's a little bit better. Maybe Andre, is somebody, no, he's under full contract. Right, you can go through like this. You can go through a whole bunch of different players and see, is there anybody here who I could potentially, sign just outright? And once you find a player that you can actually sign outright, you can go ahead and approach the sign. We know he won't sign with us. We look at this one. No, he doesn't want to sign with us either, right? But, there are ways you can play this game, and there are different things you can do if you find the right type of country that will allow you to be able to sign basically any player that you want. You can think of some countries that would come maybe really become obvious to you. So like Afghanistan is one I'm guessing that probably doesn't have much in terms of a professional team. And look at that. All of these players are month to month. And then you can look at this and say, well, this guy looks pretty good. Maybe we want to go after him. No, I can't approach to sign him, but I could approach to sign somebody like, this guy maybe. Yeah. He doesn't think that our stature in the game is big enough for his ambitions. Okay, so we could look for somebody else, right? And here you go. Mehdi Koutroupi is willing to come over. he wants us to bring a suitable signing to help ease him in. Well, we're probably not going to be able to do that, but we'll see what we can do. Finish in the top half of the league next season, I think we can do that, and then we could maybe talk him down to being a regular starter. I mean, I didn't even look to see what position he plays. He only plays as a winger, so that might not be the best signing in the world for us, right? But that's the sort of thing that you can go ahead and try to do. We're not going to do too much of that. When I did this before, I just signed players regardless of the position that they played. Now that we have a good tactic created, it might be a little bit different, but somebody like Besmela Jaladi maybe. He doesn't want to play with us. Okay, so maybe not somebody like that. But you see what you can do. You can kind of go through and say, oh, yeah, we are in need of a player in a very specific position. We could even arrange this by position if we wanted and just take a look and see, do we have any wingbacks? We don't really have any wingbacks. We could always go after a guy like this, Javid Hajizadeh, and try to get him to come over. Doesn't quite work. He doesn't really want to. You can go to other countries. You can go to like Iraq. Again, this is only going to work if you have all the players loaded and if you have all the teams loaded, right? But you can go to a bunch of these countries and find occasionally players who, I mean, he's not going to sign for us. If I have to talk to an agent, they're not going to sign with us. But if you look around, you can find players who potentially could be signed just outright. And just give it a try and see what you can do. It doesn't actually take that long either, because what you're looking for are players who are not currently under full contract, who are on month-to-month, or who are on amateur contracts, who you can kind of like sneak in and who you could like swoop away. So there you go. That's the way that it works. But yeah, the unfortunate thing about it, as we just saw, is that if you sign them and then release them, at least in American Samoa, they tend not to leave the islands, which means that you have a big problem in your league because you just brought a whole bunch of good players in. They might be inconsistent, but they're still pretty good. Anyway, there you go, and hope you have a good day. I'll talk with you again. Bye-bye.